Take number 3. This is the third time that we're actually trying to film at least the intro to this video. Folks, we have dove so hard on this particular video, we broke the camera twice. This dive scene, I'm trying to tell you, is so over the top that it shuts the camera off and corrupts the file. So we're gonna try to make sure that we don't do that for this third time. Folks, today I want to share a story with you that just recently came out in the news, and I was absolutely intrigued, to say the very least, when I ran across this. It's a story that just came out in a very well-known publication called The Real Difference Between Jail and Prison. Now, in the past, we've done a video, I think it was actually called The Difference Between Jail and Prison, or it was called Jail versus Prison, but it was in that video where we dissected the difference between these two to the absolute nitty-gritty. And again, the reason why this particular story that was just published spoke so highly to me is because of this particular publication. And I'm gonna be honest with you folks, I don't think they really know all that much about either or jail or prison. And in fact, the person who wrote this story, and I'm just guessing by the use of the verbiage in this particular story with 15 plus letter words being used, I would go as far as to wager that the only place they've ever served time at is either Stanford, Harvard, or even Yale. They most certainly ain't never stepped no foot inside of incarceration at all. So, that really makes me wonder where exactly they got the information to be able to do this story titled, not your average, not mediocre, but the real difference between jail and prison. I mean, the only thing that I can think about all of this is their facts must come from research that they've done by watching TV, or maybe even movies, or even, just maybe, things that they may have seen on the internet on channels such as here on AfterPrisonShow. Folks, I read this story prior to me actually wanting to do a video about this, and that only made me want to do this video even more, because when I did read this story, I realized that there were some major flaws in the information that they were putting out there. And I might even go as far as to say that this is potentially fake news. So it's today that I'm gonna share this story with you guys called The Real Difference Between Jail and Prison. And we're gonna see just how right they are and their description of either of these two places where you could serve time at. So, for the third time and hoping that we do not break the camera again, what do you guys say we go ahead and dive? I ain't gonna hit the camera this time. Oh my God, it didn't cut off. We're good. We're good. We got the intro. Hold on, I broke everything. Cody! I broke everything with the dive scene. Okay, that's good. What'd you break? I ran into the camera.
Let me make sure.
I don't know what happened. It cut off.
Oh, the camera cut off?
It cut off. We had a really bad impact with the camera. There we go. That's better. So it was just recently that I ran across this story that is titled The Real Difference Between Jail and Prison. Not the fake difference, not the borderline average difference, the real difference between jail and prison. And folks, when I tell you that this story struck a particular nerve in me, like the audacity of somebody who has never experienced for themselves either or jail nor prison, how could you honestly write a story about this? But it seems like that is exactly what happened with this particular story that I really want to go in on. So let's begin. The story was also published in a pretty popular and also well-known publication. So the wording and the verbiage of this basically sounds like it was written by somebody who probably attended Harvard. You ain't no convict, you a college graduate. What business you got talking about the difference between jail and prison? I know damn well you ain't never been there. Unless you're getting caught up in that college admissions parent scandal, which probably didn't land as a joke like I was. We tend to use the terms jail and prison interchangeably. My God, there's about 15 letters in that word. That's a big word. And while both are legally sanctioned confinement facilities, they're not the same thing. Folks, did you know that? Did you know that jail and prison, they're not the same thing? Now, I want to give you a little insight real quick. Sometimes, actually a lot of times here on After Prison Show, we tell prison stories. But not all the prison stories that we share actually take place in prison. Some of them actually take place in the jail. But we don't call those jail stories, and for good reason. Because when you think about jail versus prison, prison stories just sounds better. And it's actually more searched for and more popular as well. So that's why we never title a video, Jail Stories. So what we've learned from this story thus far is that prison and jail, they're not the same thing. For any of you who didn't know that, this story must think that you're tarded. You're a little ta-ta. Both jail and prison refer to a secure facility that are legally permitted to deprive people. You nailed that right on the head, because while you in either jail or prison, you most certainly gonna be deprived of a lot of things. And in fact, I ask all of you, I'd like to pose a question to you real quick. What do you think the number one thing that you get deprived of is while serving time? Is it your freedom? Is it the vajayjay? Is it some good food? What do you think? If you were locked up, or if you've been locked up, what was the one thing that you missed more than anything? Because what this story has got right thus far are two things. There is a difference between jail and prison. And while at either one of those two places, you are most certainly gonna be deprived. Both jail and prison deprive people within the criminal justice system of certain constitutional rights, such as the right to go where they want, when they want. Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you're locked up, you can go to the bathroom if you want. I mean, most of the time you got a toilet right there in your cell, even if you're locked down, so at least you can go to the bathroom. But they are right. You're not gonna be able to do very much outside of that while serving time. But under the law, they're not the same thing, so what's the difference between jail and prison? Let's begin. According to this story, jails are confinement facilities for people awaiting trial or sentencing. Well, not everybody who's in jail is awaiting trial or sentencing. You know, some people get sentenced to under a year, and if you get sentenced to under a year, 6 months, 10 months, something along those lines, in a lot of cases, you're not going to prison. You're gonna serve your time right there in the jail. So when they say that jails are for people who are awaiting trial or sentencing, though that is correct, there's a little more to that as well. They're usually run by local law enforcement, that much is true, and maintain only one level of security. No, I'm not buying that. I'm gonna have to disagree. I am gonna have to disagree with that fact right there. Jails don't just maintain one level of security, just like in prison. You got different levels to this. There are levels to this ish, like Meek Mill says. You've got your minimum, you've got your medium, and you've got your max. Then you've also got your lockdown, your segregation, your PC. There's many different levels. There's a lot of levels actually in jail. There's more than one. You know, maybe this person ought to try committing crime instead of writing blatant lies for the news. They would go on to say, to avoid spending time there, aka jail, brush up on the 45 things police officers want you to know. Folks, when I tell you that I brushed up on these 45, this is another article entirely. This is an entirely different video, and we are definitely gonna brush up together on these 45 things police officers want you to know. And boy, those 45, they're a doozy. And you know, in order to avoid spending time in jail, you ought to brush up on the 45 things police officers want you to know. You know what, real quick, let's just read one. Just one. And see if this is enough to keep you out of jail. 45 things police officers want you to know. I don't want to see your ad. The first one, the news can be misleading. Wow. That spoke to me on a lot of different levels, considering the story that we're really addressing in this, the real difference between jail and prison. The news can be misleading. How is that gonna keep you out of jail though? I mean, we brushing up on these things, at least one. How is the news can be misleading about police gonna keep you out of jail? So that was all they said about what jail is. They just said that, it's usually ran by local law enforcement. There's only one level in jail. And they said if you want to avoid spending time there, brush up on the 45 things police officers want you to know. That is not a lot of information. That's not very good. But let's go ahead and see what they say about prison. Prisons are confinement facilities for those who have already been convicted of crime. I'll agree with that. If you've been convicted of a crime and sentenced to prison time, guess where you're going? Prison. You got that. You're probably watching the AfterPrisonShow video prior to writing this story. And if I found out you did so, you're going to learn real quick what jail's like. You're going to learn, because I'm going to press charges on you. I am going to press those charges like Tekashi 6ix9ine. Give me an extra hot dog tray. Can I get that? Usually prisons are run by the state, federal government, or private companies under contracts with the government. You do have state prison. You do have federal prison. You do have privately run prisons as well because they getting all the money. Those privately ran prisons ain't nothing but a cash cow right there. Cody! I see if there's any privately run prisons for sale. Honestly, when I do that, he rarely ever answers me anymore. It's a little disheartening. Prison facilities are segregated by, and their physical design reflects their security level. Minimum, medium, maximum, administrative, sensitive charges, camps, road camps, work centers, federal camps, lows, medium, highs. Prisoners are assigned to a security level based upon the crimes for which they were convicted, as well as other factors. What exactly are those other factors, though? Oh, you don't know, do you? They didn't teach you that in Stanford. But you watched the Stanford experiment, didn't you? And you think you got all the answers. Other factors: your age, your education, your criminal history, gang affiliation. Those are most certainly some other factors that play into what type of a prison you end up getting sent to, aside from the type of charges that you have. So that's pretty much all the information they give us on prisons. There was a little bit more than they had on the jails, and to be honest, between the two, you really ain't giving me all that much. You ain't giving me that much to work with. But they go on to say jail versus prison, which I know for a fact was the title of that video that we made. Ironically, despite the fact that many jail inmates will never even go to trial, let alone be convicted. What are you talking about? What are you talking? That many people in the jail will never go to trial, let alone be convicted? People do beat charges. Charges do get dismissed when that crazy girlfriend that you got puts some charges on you because she tells you she wants to know where you're at. At least if you're locked up, I know where you're at. I've been through that. But they're saying that many people in the jails will not be convicted or ever go to trial. Are many people snitching? Well, they're definitely doing that. Take a plea deal. You won't go to trial for that. You'll just go straight to your court date to plead guilty and then straight to sentencing. And then you better hope that that plea deal you took, the judge agrees with that, because the judge doesn't always have to go along with that potential proposition of a plea deal. If the judge doesn't agree with that, he can give you whatever he wants to give you. And let me tell you what a major difference between going to trial and taking a plea deal is. This is something that this story definitely don't know. And maybe many of you out there don't know this as well, but this is very real. If you take a plea, if you plead guilty, accept a plea deal, go to that sentencing, whatever happens during that plea deal, however much time you get, you can never appeal that. The reason being is because you pled guilty. But if you go to trial, like I did, when I would end up serving 7 years, I went to trial because the plea deal they were offering me was caca, straight doo-doo, straight dookie. But I knew, even though I was going to go to trial and lose all the way around the board, at least if they gave me a boatload of time, 15, 20 plus years, at least I'd be able to appeal that. And there's not a very good chance that I would win that appeal, but at least I stood that chance of being able to do so. Because again, if you take a plea deal, that's something you can't do. You cannot appeal if you take the deal. So again, in terms of jail versus prison, according to this article, they say that many people in jail will never go to trial, let alone be convicted. The living conditions in jails tend to be worse than those in prisons. Oh, you must have never seen no messed up prisons, have you? You ever seen a prison without no AC in the summertime? You ever seen a prison without no heat in the wintertime? You better bundle up. Prison can be just as bad, if not worse, than the jail. So that's misleading right there. They also offer an example saying that jails often confine inmates in cage-like enclosures, whereas prisons may or may not. Folks, you know as well as I do, I don't have to tell you, that you can end up locked up in a cage like an animal in prison, just like in the jail. And in fact, the jails and prisons both offer pretty much the same type of things. At least a lot of times they do. You're gonna have dorm-like settings, and you're gonna have lockdown cell block-like settings. You're gonna have those in prison, you're gonna have those in jail. Not every single one is gonna offer both, but some of them most certainly do, and you're gonna be able to find both types of being locked up scenarios, dorm-like or cell block-like, in either jail or prison. You are. So they say that prison is going to cage you up like an animal, unless you end up at a minimum security prison where you're going to have the barracks, opposed to being behind bars. Jails don't necessarily provide a regular program of exercise and fresh air. That's true, but they do have classes. They've got GED classes. They've got AA and NA. Not all they're going to have church. You're going to have some pretty regular programs taking place in the jail, just like in prison. A big difference, and they kind of hit on that, is wreck. Don't get me wrong. The cliche, urban legend, prison myth is that when you get to prison, you're gonna get way more wreck than you got while you was in the jail. But let me assure you, that ain't necessarily true. In fact, I've been to prisons, I've been to a level 1 prison where we got less wreck than we did while I was in the jail. They also say the conditions at any given jail may reflect budgetary constraints as well as the idiosyncratic policies and philosophies in the local jurisdiction. Prisons, whether in the state or federal system, diverge less widely from one another in terms of living conditions. I've got no fucking idea what any of that meant right there. Talking about budgetary constraints, you're gonna have that in prison too. When there ain't enough guards on duty and you gotta stay locked down. You're gonna run across that same type of thing no matter where you're at, jail or prison. The final thing that they talk about in this story is what both jail and prison have in common. They both deprive inmates of certain constitutional rights. There are some similarities between jail and prison. For one, neither is legally entitled to deprive inmates of their 8th Amendment right not to be made to suffer cruel and unusual punishment. You trying to tell me that neither jail nor prison can make you suffer cruel and unusual punishment? Whoever wrote this story, ain't you ever heard of solitary confinement? Ain't you ever heard of prison loaf? Ain't you ever heard of the buck chair? Ain't you ever heard of the turtle suit? Cruel and unusual punishment? They can't give you that. Ain't you ever heard of these guards who be coming in here acting so nasty? Because their personal lives are in shambles? Because they look at themselves on the mirror when they on their break and say, damn, I'm a correctional guard. Where did I go wrong at? About to treat this whole wing messed up for the rest of this 12-hour shift. Talking about they can't make you suffer cruel and unusual punishment. This story, there's a lot of fake news in this story. I honestly don't want to read not another word more. Drops the mic. Folks, the real difference between jail and prison, if I was to sum this up in conclusion, when you go to jail, that's where you're going right after you get arrested. When you are awaiting trial and your sentencing, however much time that you're going to get. But not always when you end up getting sentenced do you end up getting sent to prison. In a lot of cases, you can serve your time in the jail, depending upon the amount of time that you got sentenced to, and also depending upon the crime. I've seen guys in the jail serve 2, 3, even 5 years. And in fact, at the very last jail I was at, you could stay in that jail up to 5 years. 5 years in the jail though. While in the jail, you're gonna see a whole lot of snitching. Dudes who are fighting their case, trying to box that joint in the courtroom. And one big way they trying to box that time is by testifying on the next guy. He did it. He told me he did it. That was my cellmate. We was like best friends. He told me his whole case. You got an extra hot dog tray for me though? I'm hungry. But you will see just as much snitching in prison as well. Except now we're snitching for something totally different. Maybe some few extra privileges, something out of the vending machine inside of the correctional guard's break room. Guard, listen, there's this prisoner, joepguerrero. He is probably one of the worst tattoo artists that I've ever seen in my life, but he's a tattoo artist nonetheless. If you go run up on him right now, you're gonna find all sorts of tattoo paraphernalia on him. But I ask, in fact, I beg of you, officer, before you do so, could you go to the vending machine inside of your break room? I know you've got one. You guys ain't got no vending machine though? I'll take the hot dog tray. The best way that I can explain what jail is jail is where you go when you first get arrested while you're awaiting your time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that once you get your time, you have to go to prison. While in jail, and in a lot of cases, you're gonna have less liberties and privileges than you would otherwise have while in prison, such as the lack of rec you can get, but not always in all cases. Some jails give you a lot of rec. Programming, trades, commissary items, the fact that you could order a TV or a radio. Not all jails will let you do that. Some will let you get a radio. I've never been to a jail that lets you get a TV though. And prison is a place for your longer term inmates. A place that is designed for just that. People who are gonna be there for a while. A more secure environment. A place that is established and built for just that. People who are gonna be there for a while, for years, or maybe just 1 or 2 years. You are going to have more privileges while in the prison, such as certain things that you can order, trades that you might be able to get involved with, certain schooling, and also in some cases, more room to maneuver. Whether that's out on the rec yard or being able to leave from your building to go to the school, to go to that trade class, to go to commissary, to go to the chow hall. And those are just a couple of examples of the differences between these two places that I can think of offhand. If you guys want to see how we really dissected this, check out the original video that we did about this. And I think it was called Jail versus Prison. But as I wrap this up, I want to leave you with one thing both of these places have in common. And that is, both these places somewhere that you don't never want to go. And if you've been there, you already know these are somewhere you never want to go back to. Ain't nothing really good about either one of these places. So instead of asking you to brush up on the 45 things cops want you to know, I'm just going to ask you to do your best. I mean, your very bestest to stay the hell out of either one of them, jail or prison. And that's my good piece for the day. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment. Let me know exactly what you thought about it. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!